Hey guys, today I'm going to try and fit everything you need to know about the Formulator into one PowerPoint presentation. One might argue that the letter is outdated and people no longer use letters. But whether you send a letter by mail or email, the basic principles stay the same. You should be capable of writing a friendly letter as well as the formal letter. We have already discussed the friendly letter. The friendly letter has a more informal tone. It is usually addressed to someone you know very well and has only one address, your address, on the right-hand side of the page. The formal letter, however, is communication used in official or important situations, or with people you do not know well. The tone of voice is always polite and businesslike, and you use a formal register. You do not engage with small talk in a formal letter. You need to note that the format for the formal letter also differs quite a bit compared to the friendly letter. Let's quickly look at a few differences between formal and informal writing. First, the register. In a formal letter, we use a formal register, and our expressions is formal and polite. We will rather say something like, "You are cordially invited to attend a celebration in honor of." But in a more informal register, we will rather say, "Please come to a party for John." In a formal letter, we will write our words out in full. No contractions or abbreviations are allowed. You will therefore write "cannot" out in full instead of using "can't." Note that "cannot" is one word. In informal writing, contractions are acceptable and informal words and expressions may be used. But since you are being assessed on your language use and conventions, I will still suggest that you limit these expressions even in an informal letter. Sentences must be written out in full and grammatically correct in both formal and informal writing. However, you are allowed to use informal language when it comes to informal writing. But in formal writing, slang is not acceptable. The third person is used in formal writing, but we use the first person in informal writing. In other words, you avoid using the pronouns I, me, and we in formal writing. We rather say, "The grade 12s are concerned about their examinations," instead of "we are worried about the exams." Another way of changing your informal writing into formal writing is by changing the sentence construction from active voice to passive voice. Rather say, "A complaint has been lodged by the parents," instead of "the parents have lodged a complaint." Let us focus a little bit more on the formal letter. There are three main types of formal letters. The first, a letter of complaint. The name says it all. We write this letter to complain about something. We send the letter to a company, shop, a business, or to any other institution when we want to complain about poor service, a faulty product, etc. The second is a letter of application. One will write this letter when you apply for something, for example, a student loan, or even when you are applying for a bursary. This letter will accompany your curriculum vitae when you apply for a job. And finally, a letter to the editor or to the press. This letter is sent to a newspaper to either comment on an article previously published or to give your opinion on an issue. In order to determine which type of letter to write, you need to read the instructions on your question paper very carefully. Ask yourself the following questions. Why am I writing this letter? To whom am I writing the letter? What do I want to happen as a result of writing this letter? And what tone and style would be most appropriate for this kind of letter. Let's take a closer look at the layout of the formal letter. Your letter should have the following: the sender's address, the recipient's address, a salutation, the subject heading, an introduction in short, paragraphs, a conclusion, and an ending. Here is an example of the general format of the formal letter. The sender's address, that is your own address, appears on the right. Note that we use no punctuation when we write the address. We use capital letters for proper nouns, in other words, the name of the street, suburb, and city, and we write the date out in full: day, month, and year. In English, we write the number of the street address first, and then the name of the street. Street must also be written with a capital letter. If you live in Schoeman Street, for example, the words Schoeman and street are two separate words. Remember never to overcomplicate things for yourself. If you live in a street and the name is difficult to spell, no one will know if you are making it up or not. Just pick an easier street name, one that you can spell, so that you don't lose unnecessary marks for spelling. Make it Short Street or Long Street for that matter, but pick one that you can actually spell. The recipient's address is written against the margin on the left. Here, we also do not use any punctuation. You always start with the title of the person you are writing to, followed by the name of the company or business. Leave a line open after the second address, and then you write the salutation. The salutation is the greeting. Begin with Dear Sir for males or Dear Madam for females. If the gender of the person is unknown, you can write Dear Sir / Madam. But in a letter to the editor, you never use dear. You only write Sir or Madam. The subject line tells us in short what this letter is about. You do not write your subject line in a full sentence, but you must try to make it as catchy as possible. The subject heading must either be underlined or in block capitals. In a question paper, I think it would be easier just to underline, but you can decide which one to use. We do not put a full stop at the end of the subject line. The introduction must be short and you need to get to the point immediately. Like I said before, you do not make small talk in a formal letter. In the body paragraphs, you provide the details as to your complaint. Make sure it is written in good English and make use of a high register. In other words, formal language. Your conclusion must be short and it brings all the information together. Here you can request an action if you wrote a letter of complaint. Always end with yours faithfully. Once again, just stick with yours faithfully. And please practice the spelling. No punctuation is used in the ending. For a formal letter, you end with your signature followed by your name and surname. In other words, at the end of your letter, your final paragraph, you leave a line open. Then you write yours faithfully, leave about 2 lines open, sign with your signature, and underneath that, you write your name and your surname, or initials and surname. We are now going to have a quick look at the different types of formal letter with an example or two for each. Study the examples carefully because that will give you an idea of the tone, register, and vocabulary that we use in formal letters. The first is the letter of complaint. You always address the letter of complaint to the most senior person responsible. With this letter, you are trying to persuade a person to take action. In your first paragraph, you will identify the issue of complaint. What are you complaining about? Remember to keep it short. In paragraph 2, you state the fact and provide the necessary details. In paragraph 3, you state what you would like to happen, or how to expect the problem to be dealt with. And finally, in paragraph 4, you appeal to the reader's sense of moral values. Try to use adverbs of degree, like I am extremely upset, instead of just saying I am upset. The register must be formal but polite, as for all formal letters. Here is an example. Note the format. Your address is on the right, the sender's address on the left, the salutation, subject line, different paragraphs, and you end with yours faithfully, your signature and initial or name and surname. Here is another example. Note that the subject line is not underlined, but in capital letters. Just a few hints when writing a letter of complaint. Write to a person in a specific position. The subject line must give the reader an immediate idea of what the letter is about. Keep it to the point, but give enough details. And then finally, note that only women sign the letter Miss or Mrs. Men never use Mr. and only sign using their initials and surname. The covering letter or letter of application. This is seen as a reflection of the applicant and must therefore be neat, correct, and make a good impression. Remember, first impressions last, and the first impression that they will get from you is your letter of application. The main purpose is to be granted an interview or a bursary. Make sure that you provide the necessary detail and that the content is tailored to suit the job description. It does not help you say you work well with horses, but you're applying for a position at Spur. Here is an example. Note that you matriculated at Hoërskool Pietersburg and not High School Petersburg or PHS. Remember, you are not allowed to use abbreviations. Here is another example. If they do not provide the recipient's address in the question paper, you can make one up. The letter to the press. This letter offers an opportunity to air your views on matters of general interest, criticize, express appreciation, and to see your letter in print. Note, for the salutation, you use Sir only, not Dear Sir. Try to use a crisp and striking subject line in your letter. Remember, you cannot blame the newspaper for the problem or expect them to fix the problem. They are not responsible for causing the problem. Never use an emotional style. Always be polite and avoid any form of slander. Let's look at the example. Clearly explain your reason or purpose for writing. State the issue immediately and make sure that you do it clearly. Criticize another writer's points logically and calmly. You may criticize, but be constructive. In other words, don't break the person down. Be rational, calm, and relevant to win the argument. Use relevant examples to support your viewpoint. Your language and register should be acceptable. End with a challenge, question, or memorable statement. Check the format. Your letter must be of value. Let it make a difference. And finally, a letter to ask for a donation. The letter must be error-free. The registers should be polite, tactful, and rhetorical. Explain what the occasion is, who will be there, why there is an occasion, and how you will be celebrating. Also provide information on where and when the event will be hosted, and why you are approaching this prospective donor. State exactly what it is you require and give the recipient of this letter a chance to get the donation or products somewhere, if at all possible. Here is an example. Here is an example of a checklist that you can use to edit your draft. It is always good to have your own checklist. Go through your checklist to make sure you have properly edited your draft before you write your final. Editing your work is extremely important. No one can write the perfect letter first time around. I have also included the rubric for you. Remember, we do not just read through your creative writing and then decide, I think this one is worth a 60%. We actually follow the rubric. Here you can see what is expected of you if you want to be considered an exceptional writer. We assess your content, planning, and format, as well as your language style and editing. Note the planning and editing. Note that if you want to achieve high marks, your work should be outstanding, intelligent, and mature. You must have an extensive knowledge. Writing maintains focus throughout. It must be highly elaborate, appropriate, and accurate. The tone and the register should be highly appropriate, and it should be virtually error-free. Only then can you expect a 90%. We have reached the end of our PowerPoint presentation. I hope to see well-written formal letters in future. Remember to study the format and read through the examples carefully before you write your own formal letter. Happy writing, guys!